Tara stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the shining glass building in front of her. It was a luxury car dealership, big, modern, and full of expensive cars that most people could only dream of. Tara was wearing a plain brown sweater, faded jeans, and old shoes. Her hair was tied in a simple ponytail. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing fancy. But her eyes were calm and confident. She took a deep breath and walked inside. Inside the showroom, the lights were bright, and the floors were so shiny they reflected the ceiling. Expensive cars sat proudly on display. One was a bright red sports car. Another was a black luxury SUV. Each had a price tag that could buy a small house. Tara walked slowly, admiring the cars with quiet interest. She didn't look rich, but she also didn't look nervous. She looked like someone who knew what she wanted. A group of salesmen stood near the coffee machine, laughing and sipping drinks. They noticed her right away. "Look at her," one of them whispered. "Lost, maybe." Another smirked. "She probably came in to use the bathroom." They laughed. Tara walked up to the nearest car, a sleek silver model, and bent down to read the features on the sticker. A tall salesman named Brian walked over to her. His suit was expensive. His smile was fake. "Hi, miss," he said with a chuckle. "These cars are a bit special. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Tara looked up. "Yes," she said politely. "I'm looking for a car, something reliable but stylish. Maybe that black SUV over there." Brian raised his eyebrows. "Oh, do you? Have a budget?" Tara nodded. "Money is not a problem." Brian couldn't hide his grin. "Of course." He turned to the other salesman and winked. They laughed louder this time. One of them, a younger guy with slick hair, walked over and said, "Ma'am, these cars start at $90,000. We don't do rentals." Tara kept calm. "I'm not renting. I'm buying." The young man shook his head and laughed. "With what?" "Your lunch money." The others laughed too. A couple in the showroom stopped and stared at the scene. Tara's smile faded, but she still stayed calm. "I came here with respect," she said quietly. "But I don't think I'm getting the same." Brian rolled his eyes. "Look, we don't have time for games. Please leave." Another salesman added, "Try the used car lot down the street. Might be more your level." Tara looked around one last time. Everyone was watching, but no one stopped them. She picked up her small bag, turned toward the door, and began to walk away. Before she stepped out, she paused. She turned her head just a little and said, "You'll regret this." Outside, the wind blew softly. Tara stood on the sidewalk, eyes still on the building. The salesmen inside were laughing again, high-fiving each other like they'd done something clever. But they didn't know who she was. They didn't know her story. They didn't know what was coming. Tara pulled out her phone. She made one call. The voice on the other end answered, "Hello, Miss Tara. What do you need?" Her voice was calm. "I want to buy a car dealership," she said. "That one." The line went silent for a second. Then came the reply, "Understood. I'll start the process." Tara smiled, not out of anger, but focus. This wasn't revenge. This was justice, and it had only just begun. After leaving the dealership, Tara didn't rush. She didn't storm off in anger. She didn't let the mocking words of the salesman change her mood. She knew this was part of the plan. But as she sat in the back of the taxi, the world outside moving quickly, her mind wandered back in time. A childhood of struggles. Tara was born in a small town, far away from the shiny cars and tall buildings. Her parents had separated when she was young, and she was raised by her mother, a woman who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Her mother, Miriam, was kind and strong. She never complained, even when the bills piled up. But Tara could see the weight in her mother's eyes. The stress, the worry. They didn't have much, but they always made do. When Tara was young, she would walk past the car dealerships, dreaming of the day she could drive a car like the ones in the windows. But she knew that dream was far away. She didn't even have money for bus fares some days, let alone enough to buy a luxury car. A turning point. Leaving the small town, Tara was determined to escape the struggles of her childhood. She worked hard in school, studying late into the night while others were out having fun. It wasn't easy, but Tara's goal was clear. She wanted to build something better. She wanted to help her mother. After graduating, she moved to the city, leaving the small town behind. She didn't have much, just a suitcase, a few $100s, and a dream. Tara found a small apartment in a quiet part of town and worked long hours at a local coffee shop, saving every penny she could. Every day, she reminded herself of her mother's strength. Her mother had given her everything, even when she had nothing. Tara didn't want to waste that gift. The breakthrough. Her first business. One day, Tara met a man at the coffee shop, a businessman who was kind but honest. He took an interest in Tara and saw something in her that others didn't. He offered her a chance to work with him on a tech startup. Tara didn't know much about tech, but she knew how to learn. She worked harder than she ever had before. Day and night, Tara studied, learned, and pushed herself beyond her limits. The business slowly grew. It wasn't easy. The men in the office didn't always take her seriously. They thought she was just a pretty face, not a businesswoman. But Tara proved them wrong, showing up every day and giving her all. She built her company from the ground up. Years passed, and Tara's company became successful. She made her first million at 28. The small apartment was gone, replaced by a beautiful house. Her mother could finally relax, but Tara never forgot where she came from. She stayed humble, kept her focus on her goals, and remembered the struggles that had shaped her. The life changed forever. But no matter how much Tara achieved, one thing still haunted her: the memories of being underestimated, of people looking at her and thinking she was too poor, too quiet, too small to make a difference. When she walked into the dealership that day, she hadn't been angry. She had been reminded of the past, of how it felt to be invisible, to be judged by what others saw on the outside, instead of who she truly was on the inside. The salesmen in the dealership had no idea who they were mocking. They thought she was just another woman who couldn't afford what they sold. They didn't see her strength. They didn't know her story. But she had learned something important along the way. People who judge you by your appearance never know what you're truly capable of. The plan begins. As the taxi turned onto her street, Tara felt a wave of calm wash over her. She knew she had a lot of work to do. The first step had been taken. She had made her call, set the wheels in motion. She had already started the process of buying the dealership. The papers would be signed soon. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proving a point. It was about showing those salesmen that you can't judge a person by their appearance. You can't mock someone without understanding their past. Tara knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to just buy the dealership. She was going to turn it into something different. Something that stood for respect, for equality, for giving everyone a chance. Tara sat in the back of the taxi, watching the world go by. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. Tara sat at her desk in her quiet home office, the soft glow of the afternoon sun streaming through the window. The papers she had signed earlier that morning were neatly stacked in front of her. The deal had been completed. The luxury car dealership that had once laughed her out the door now belonged to her. But what the salesman hadn't known, what they could never have imagined, was that Tara wasn't just any woman. They thought she was poor. They thought she was just another dreamer. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know what she had built, what she had sacrificed. Tara wasn't just the owner of a tech company. She was something much bigger. The hidden wealth. Many people knew her as a quiet, hard-working businesswoman. She wasn't flashy. She didn't drive expensive cars or wear designer clothes. In fact, Tara preferred to live simply. But in reality, she was a millionaire, a self-made millionaire. She had started her business from nothing, building it with her own hands, And over the years, it had grown into something huge. Tara had never shared her wealth. She didn't like to draw attention to herself. Most people, even the ones who worked for her company, had no idea how successful she truly was. She kept her life private. Her wealth was a quiet kind of power, the call that changed everything. The moment Tara had made the decision to buy the dealership, it wasn't just about getting back at those salesmen. It was about something more. It was about showing the world that appearances didn't matter. So, she picked up the phone. Her call had gone to her lawyer, a man named Sam. He had been with her for years, handling all her business deals, always keeping things quiet. "Sam," Tara had said calmly, "I want to buy the luxury car dealership down the street." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Are you serious?" Sam finally asked, surprised. "The one on 5th Avenue. That dealership is worth millions. Why would you?" "Just do it," Tara interrupted. "I have a plan. The deal is done." It had taken only a few days for everything to fall into place. Sam was quick, working behind the scenes to make sure the deal was completed without anyone knowing Tara's identity. She didn't want the salesman to find out who she was until it was too late. She wanted them to continue thinking of her as the woman they'd laughed at. By the time she returned to the dealership, the papers were signed, and Tara was now the proud owner of the entire business. A reminder of the past. Sitting at her desk, Tara reflected on her journey. She thought about the years of hard work, the long nights, and the sacrifices. But more than that, she thought about the times when people underestimated her, when they assumed she couldn't do something just because she didn't look the part. She had learned the hard way that people judged by appearances, but Tara had always known something they didn't. It didn't matter what people saw on the outside. It was what you did, what you built, that truly mattered. The salesmen had thought she was weak. They thought she was just another woman with no money, no future. But they were wrong. They didn't know the real Tara. They didn't know the woman who had built an empire from scratch. They didn't know that Tara was more than capable of taking them down, not with anger, but with power. The moment of truth. Tara took a deep breath and looked out the window, watching the cars pass by. She thought about what she would do next. The dealership needed changes. It needed to reflect her vision. A place where people were treated with respect, no matter who they were. Her plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about making a statement. It was about creating something new, something better. She picked up the phone again, calling her lawyer. "Sam," she said with a smile in her voice, "it's time. Let's turn this place into something they'll never forget." Tara stood up and walked to the window, her reflection looking back at her in the glass. She wasn't just buying a dealership. She was changing everything. And the salesmen who had laughed at her, they wouldn't know what hit them. Tara stood outside the dealership, her eyes scanning the busy street. The building was the same, shiny and full of expensive cars, but everything was about to change. She had been gone for only a week, but it felt like much longer. She had worked quickly to finalize the paperwork, but now it was time to make her mark. She didn't come here for revenge. She came here to show them all that they had been wrong about her. The salesman's shock. Inside the dealership, the salesmen were gathered around, laughing and chatting as usual. They had no idea what was coming. They thought everything was still the same. They had no clue that Tara now owned the entire place. Brian, the salesman who had mocked her first, was leaning against a desk, joking with a new customer. His smug smile made it clear he thought he was in control. But his confidence was about to shatter. Tara walked in through the front doors, and the bell above the door jingled softly. The salesman didn't notice her at first. They were too busy with their own conversation. Tara took a moment to watch them, to take in the sight of the men who had laughed at her. She could hear Brian's voice now, bragging about how he had handled the woman who thought she could buy a car. Then she stepped forward. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and even. The salesman turned at the sound of her voice. their faces immediately changing from casual to confused. Brian froze when he saw her standing there. "I see you remember me," Tara said, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "What are you doing here?" Brian asked, still not understanding who she was. "I thought you left for good." Tara took a step forward. The other salesmen exchanged glances. No one had ever spoken to Brian like this before. They all assumed that he was the top salesman, the one everyone listened to. But Tara wasn't impressed by him. "I didn't leave. I'm actually back," Tara replied, her tone not hostile, but firm. "And I'm here to make some changes." Brian looked confused. "Changes? What do you mean?" "This is my dealership. Or, well, it was mine." Tara didn't waste time. "Actually, Brian," she said slowly, "this is my dealership now." The realization, the silence in the room was deafening. Brian's face turned pale, his mouth falling open. The other salesmen looked at each other, unsure of what to say. "Wait, what?" One of the other salesmen stammered. "You're the new owner." "But how? When?" Tara stepped further into the room, her eyes scanning the faces of the men who had mocked her just a few days ago. "Let's just say I made a few calls," she said. "And now I own the dealership." She paused, letting the words sink in. The realization hit them all at once. Tara was no longer just a woman they had laughed at. She was now in control. A surprise guest. Just as the shock was beginning to settle in, Tara's phone buzzed. She looked down at it briefly before glancing back up at the salesman. "I'm not alone, by the way," Tara added with a smile. She pressed a button on her phone, and within moments, a black SUV pulled up outside. The salesman couldn't help but stare through the glass doors. The car parked, and the door opened. A tall man stepped out. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his posture confident and professional. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught their attention. It was the fact that he was carrying a briefcase. The door to the dealership opened, and in walked one of Tara's business partners, a well-known figure in the city. His reputation preceded him. The salesman, still stunned by the earlier revelation, watched in disbelief as Tara's partner walked toward her. "Good to see you again, Tara," he said, offering a brief nod to the salesman before turning his attention back to Tara. "Shall we get started?" The beginning of change. Tara smiled and nodded. "Let's do this," she said. She turned back to the salesmen, who were still too shocked to speak. "I'm here to make a difference in this dealership," she said. "I want everyone to feel respected. No one will be turned away because of how they look. And no one will be treated poorly, no matter who they are." The salesmen didn't know what to say. They had thought they were the ones in charge. They had thought they could mock and belittle anyone they wanted. But now, the tables had turned. Tara was no longer the quiet woman they had laughed at. She was in control now, and her plan had only just begun. The air inside the dealership was thick with tension. Tara stood tall, her posture strong and confident. The salesmen stood frozen, their mouths agape, still trying to process what had just happened. Tara wasn't here to make enemies. She wasn't here to fire anyone, though that might have been the easy way out. Instead, she had a plan, and that plan involved change, growth, and respect. Changing the culture. Tara knew that the first step in rebuilding the dealership was changing the culture. She wasn't going to tolerate any more arrogance, disrespect, or unfair treatment. The salesman needed to understand that being kind and professional was now the expectation, not the exception. "Listen carefully," Tara began, her voice calm but firm. "You all work for me now, and things are going to be different around here." She let her words sink in, then continued, "First, we're going to focus on making this a place where every customer is treated with dignity. No one will be ignored or mocked again." The salesmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had always been used to treating customers like they were beneath them, especially those they thought couldn't afford what they were selling. But now, that was going to change. Tara turned to Brian, who was still standing by the desk, looking completely bewildered. "You," she said, locking eyes with him. "You're the one who mocked me when I came in here, but you're also the one who's going to learn how to treat people properly. This dealership is not about your ego. It's about providing the service." Brian gulped but said nothing. Tara could see the fear in his eyes. He didn't expect to be called out. He didn't expect to be the one to change. The first steps to change. Tara had already made a few calls earlier that morning. She wasn't wasting time. By the time she entered the dealership, her new staff was on the way. A new management team was being brought in to help implement her vision. "I've already hired a few people to help you all understand how to treat customers with respect," she said, her voice steady. "I'll be bringing in trainers who specialize in customer service and professionalism." She turned to the man she had called earlier, her business partner, John, who had walked in with her. "Tara," John said with a smile, "we've got a full schedule for the next few weeks. Training, rebranding, and some tough talks with the previous staff. This is going to be a fresh start for everyone." Tara nodded, satisfied with the plan. The first day of rebuilding. The next few days were hectic. Tara spent most of her time meeting with the new team, planning out the changes she wanted to make, and setting up training sessions for the salesmen. It wasn't easy, but Tara wasn't backing down. She brought in a customer service expert, a woman named Michelle, who would teach the salesmen how to handle customers with care and respect. Michelle was firm but fair, and she wasted no time letting the salesmen know how far their behavior had gone out of line. "Respect is earned," Michelle told them. "And if you want to earn your customers' trust, you need to treat them like they matter, no matter how they look, where they come from, or how much money they have." The first few days were tough. Some of the salesmen, especially Brian, struggled with the new rules. But Tara was patient. She knew it would take time, but she was ready to put in the work. A new reputation. As the weeks passed, things slowly began to improve. The dealership started to gain a new reputation in town, one of fairness, kindness, and respect. Customers who once felt ignored now felt welcome. The salesmen, especially Brian, began to realize that their old ways of doing things were no longer acceptable. They started to listen to Tara and her new management team. They started to understand that Tara wasn't just there to run the business. She was there to make it a place where everyone had a chance. A personal victory. One afternoon, Tara walked through the dealership, observing the changes. She saw Brian talking to a young woman who had just entered the store. He was smiling, offering her coffee, and listening to her needs. Tara couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was progress. Tara walked over to Brian, who looked up at her with a nervous smile. "How are we doing?" she asked. "Better," Brian replied, still a little unsure. "I think I'm finally starting to get it." Tara nodded. "Good. But remember, this isn't just about selling cars. It's about treating people like they matter. And if we can do that, the rest will follow." A new beginning. As Tara stood in the middle of the dealership, watching the salesmen interact with customers, she felt a sense of pride. It had taken time, but the changes were starting to stick. The people who had once mocked her were beginning to understand what it meant to treat others with respect. This wasn't just a business. It was a place where people could feel valued. It was a place where Tara had taken a stand for kindness and equality. She wasn't just rebuilding a dealership. She was rebuilding lives. Hers, the salesmen's, and even the customers who walked through the doors. Tara nodded. "Good. But remember, this isn't just about selling cars. It's about treating people like they matter. And if we can do that, the rest will follow." A new beginning. As Tara stood in the middle of the dealership, watching the salesmen interact with customers, she felt a sense of pride. It had taken time, but the changes were starting to stick. The people who had once mocked her were beginning to understand what it meant to treat others with respect. This wasn't just a business. It was a place where people could feel valued. It was a place where Tara had taken a stand for kindness and equality. She wasn't just rebuilding a dealership. She was rebuilding lives. Hers, the salesmen, and even the customers who walked through the doors. Weeks had passed since Tara took over the dealership. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The once cold and arrogant salesmen were now more respectful. Customers who had been ignored or treated unfairly began to feel welcome and valued. Tara's plan was working. But there was still one challenge left. The old staff, the people who had mocked her, those who thought they were untouchable, still didn't fully trust the changes. The big deal. One morning, Tara received a call from a very important client. This wasn't just any customer. This was a wealthy businessman who had the power to make or break the dealership's reputation. His name was Mr. Thompson, and he was known for being tough. He didn't care about customer service or friendliness. He cared about the deal. Tara knew that if this deal went well, it would solidify her reputation in the luxury car world. But if things went wrong, it could ruin everything she had worked for. She was nervous, but she didn't show it. She had prepared her team, trained them, and now it was time to test if they were truly ready. The arrival. Tara stood at the front of the dealership, watching as a black limousine pulled into the parking lot. Mr. Thompson stepped out of the car, his cold eyes scanning the building as he walked inside. He was tall, with a serious expression and expensive taste. The salesman had been briefed about his arrival and knew this was a make-or-break moment for the dealership. But despite the preparations, Tara could see the tension in their faces. This wasn't going to be easy. As Mr. Thompson approached the front desk, he looked at Brian, who was still adjusting to his new role. "You're the sales manager?" Mr. Thompson asked with a raised eyebrow. Brian nodded, but his voice trembled slightly. "Yes, sir. We'll do everything we can to ensure you have the best experience." Tara stood in the background, watching carefully. She didn't interrupt. This was Brian's moment to prove himself. If he could handle Mr. Thompson, he would show everyone that change was possible. The test begins. Mr. Thompson began to ask questions. He was demanding, impatient, and hard to impress. Tara could hear him speaking in a sharp tone, questioning everything from the dealership's prices to the quality of their customer service. Brian answered with confidence, though Tara could tell he was feeling the pressure. He spoke carefully, trying his best to remember everything Michelle, the customer service trainer, had taught him. But then Mr. Thompson made a comment that made everyone in the room tense. "You know," he said, looking directly at Brian, "I've dealt with dealerships before, but never one like this. What's so special about you?" Brian swallowed hard. His eyes flicked toward Tara, seeking guidance, but Tara remained silent. This was his test. It was his moment to show that the training had worked. Brian took a deep breath and stepped forward. "We treat our customers with respect, sir. We believe in honesty and transparency. Our goal isn't just to sell you a car, it's to provide you with the best experience possible. We want you to feel valued and heard, whether you're buying a car or just looking." Mr. Thompson stared at Brian for a long moment. Tara could see his expression soften, just slightly. "Respect, ha," Mr. Thompson muttered. "I've never heard that from a dealership before. Maybe you're different." A smooth deal. The rest of the meeting went surprisingly smoothly. Brian was able to answer Mr. Thompson's questions without hesitation, and Tara watched as the businessman slowly began to warm up to the dealership's new approach. By the end of the meeting, Mr. Thompson shook Brian's hand. "You've impressed me," he said, his tone still businesslike, but with a hint of approval. "I'll take the car." Brian's eyes widened in disbelief. "Thank you, sir," he said, trying to keep his composure. As Mr. Thompson left, Tara approached Brian with a proud smile. "You did it," she said. "You proved that respect is more important than just making a sale." Brian smiled back, a genuine expression of gratitude on his face. He had learned, and he had passed the test. The real victory. Later that day, as Tara walked through the dealership, she noticed something different. The salesmen were talking to customers with real interest in their needs. They weren't just trying to sell cars. They were trying to understand what the customers wanted. They were building relationships. Tara felt a sense of pride. The changes she had made were beginning to stick. The staff had grown, not just in skill, but in character. She smiled to herself. The dealership wasn't just a place to buy cars anymore. It had become a symbol of her journey, from being underestimated to being in charge. It was a place where people were valued for who they were, not what they could buy. A new chapter. That night, as Tara closed the doors to the dealership and turned off the lights, she stood in the empty showroom. She had faced challenges, but she had overcome them all. The dealership was now a reflection of her, strong, patient, and unyielding. She had built it from the ground up, and she wasn't going to let anyone forget how far she had come. Tara took one last look around before walking out the door, a quiet sense of victory in her heart. "You did it," she said. "You proved that respect is more important than just making a sale." Brian smiled back, a genuine expression of gratitude on his face. He had learned, and he had passed the test. The real victory. Later that day, as Tara walked through the dealership, she noticed something different. The salesmen were talking to customers with real interest in their needs. They weren't just trying to sell cars. They were trying to understand what the customers wanted. They were building relationships. Tara felt a sense of pride. The changes she had made were beginning to stick. The staff had grown, not just in skill, but in character. She smiled to herself. The dealership wasn't just a place to buy cars anymore. It had become a symbol of her journey, from being underestimated to being in charge. It was a place where people were valued for who they were, not what they could buy. A new chapter. That night, as Tara closed the doors to the dealership and turned off the lights, she stood in the empty showroom. She had faced challenges, but she had overcome them all. The dealership was now a reflection of her, strong, patient, and unyielding. She had built it from the ground up, and she wasn't going to let anyone forget how far she had come. Tara took one last look around before walking out the door, a quiet sense of victory in her heart. The dealership had changed. Tara had changed it, and with that change came a deep sense of pride. But there was one final test, one last surprise that would truly show if she had made the right decision all along. The unexpected visitor. It was a calm morning at the dealership. Tara was sitting in her office, looking over some new inventory and preparing for the week ahead. Her team had been working hard, and it was clear that things were improving. Customers were more relaxed and open. The salesman, especially Brian, had learned a valuable lesson in humility and respect. Suddenly, the door to her office opened, and Brian stepped in with a surprised look on his face. "Tara, there's someone here to see you," he said, sounding a little nervous. Tara raised an eyebrow. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the serious tone in Brian's voice caught her attention. "Who is it?" she asked. "It's Mr. Thompson," Brian said quietly. Tara's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Thompson, the wealthy businessman who had been her ultimate test a few weeks ago. What was he doing here? "Send him in," Tara said, standing up. A surprising offer. Mr. Thompson entered the office, a broad smile on his face. Tara could immediately sense something different about him. He wasn't the same man she had met during their first meeting. He seemed more relaxed, almost friendly. "Tara, I wanted to personally thank you," he said as he shook her hand. "You've completely changed my perspective on business." Tara was taken aback. She had expected him to come in, make a complaint, or maybe even offer criticism. Instead, he was thanking her. "I've been to hundreds of dealerships, but never one like yours," he continued. "You've built something special here. I can see that it's not just about selling cars. It's about creating real relationships with people." Tara smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction. She knew the changes had worked, but hearing them from someone like Mr. Thompson made it all feel real. "I'm glad you feel that way," Tara replied. "We've worked hard to get here." But Mr. Thompson wasn't finished. He had one more thing to say. "The big proposal." "I've been thinking," Mr. Thompson said, his eyes gleaming with something Tara couldn't quite place. "Your dealership has a lot of potential. I want to offer you a partnership, an investment. I believe in what you're doing here, and I think together we could expand even further." Tara stared at him, her mind racing. "A partnership, an investment. I'm offering you the chance to grow, to take this dealership to the next level." Mr. Thompson continued. "You've earned my respect, Tara, and I think we can both benefit from working together." Tara was shocked. This wasn't just about business. This was a whole new opportunity. She had always wanted to grow her dealership, but she had never expected someone like Mr. Thompson to come forward with an offer like this. The moment of truth. Tara sat back in her chair, taking a moment to think. This was a big decision. She had always valued independence, but could this partnership take her vision even further? Could she trust Mr. Thompson? After a few moments of silence, Tara looked Mr. Thompson in the eye and said, "I appreciate the offer, but what I've built here, I want to keep it true to my vision. I've worked too hard to get here." Mr. Thompson seemed to consider her words for a moment. Then, with a smile, he nodded. "I respect that," he said. "I'll leave the offer on the table, but I understand your decision. I've never met anyone like you, Tara. You're the kind of leader this world needs more of." A new direction. As Mr. Thompson left, Tara stood by the window, looking out at the dealership. It wasn't the grandest building, nor the most luxurious, but it was hers. She had built it from the ground up, piece by piece, and no matter what offers came her way, Tara knew that her vision and values were what mattered most. She had taken on a group of salesmen who had mocked her and turned them into a team of people who respected others. She had proven that kindness and respect could change a business for the better. And now she was in control of her destiny. The final reflection. Later that evening, Tara sat alone in her office, reflecting on the journey she had been on. She had faced challenges, setbacks, and doubts, but she had never given up. The dealership was thriving, and she had built something that was truly her own. It wasn't just about selling cars anymore. It was about creating an environment where people felt respected, where both employees and customers were treated equally. She had created a place where kindness, professionalism, and hard work were at the heart of everything. As she turned off the lights and locked up for the night, Tara felt a sense of pride. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was ready. She had earned her place, and she knew that no matter what came next, she could face it with confidence.